Midnight, the hour when the world seems to hold its breath, when the familiar becomes strange and the shadows grow teeth. Outside, the streets are empty, the city's pulse slowed to a hush, as if every living thing is waiting for something unseen to pass by. The clocks tick, relentless and indifferent, marking the moment when yesterday dies and tomorrow is not yet born. It's a time that belongs to neither day nor night, a threshold, a seam in the fabric of reality, where the rules we trust begin to unravel. You know this hour. Maybe you felt it, the weight of silence pressing against your windows, the way the darkness seems to thicken, as if it's not just the absence of light, but the presence of something else. Something watching, something waiting. The air grows colder, the walls seem to breathe, and every creak of the house becomes a question you're not sure you want answered. Have you ever lain awake, staring at the ceiling, certain that if you looked away just for a moment, you'd see a shape in the corner of your room that wasn't there before? Have you ever felt eyes on you when you were sure you were alone? Tonight, we stand together at the edge of that threshold, the witching hour, the moment when the veil between worlds is at its thinnest, and the things we try to forget slip through the cracks. Some say it's just superstition, a trick of the mind, a relic of a more fearful age. But what if it isn't? What if midnight is a door, and sometimes, just sometimes, something on the other side decides to step through? Tonight, I'll share with you 3 stories. Each one begins at midnight, at the very edge of what we call reality. Each one will take you deeper into the unknown, where history, horror, and the human mind collide. So I ask you, have you ever felt something watching you at midnight? If you have, you're not alone. And if you haven't by the end of tonight, you just might. Midnight is more than a number on a clock. It is a boundary, a liminal space, a moment suspended between what was and what will be. For centuries, people have looked to the stroke of 12 with a mixture of awe and dread, sensing that something fundamental shifts when the world is at its darkest. In every culture, in every age, midnight has been a time of transformation, a crossroads where the ordinary dissolves and the extraordinary seeps in dot by day. The world is governed by reason. Sunlight pours through windows, illuminating every corner, banishing the unknown. We move through our routines with confidence, trusting in the logic of cause and effect, the safety of crowds, the comfort of the familiar. Daylight is the realm of certainty, of science, of things that can be measured and explained. But as the sun sinks and the shadows lengthen, something ancient stirs. The night is a different country, ruled by different laws down at midnight. The last vestiges of daylight are gone, and with them, the illusions of control. The world becomes a place of secrets. The familiar is rendered strange, and the mind so rational by day begins to wander down darker paths. It is no accident that so many superstitions cluster around this hour. In medieval Europe, midnight was called the witching hour, believed to be the time when witches, ghosts, and demons were at their most powerful. In Japan, it is the hour of the yurei, restless spirits who slip through the cracks of the living world. In West Africa, midnight is when the trickster spirits emerge, blurring the line between mischief and malice. Even in the age of electricity and reason, midnight retains its power. Hospitals report more deaths at this hour than any other. Insomniacs lie awake, haunted by thoughts they can't escape. Police officers and paramedics know that the calls they receive after midnight are often the strangest, the most inexplicable. It is as if the world itself becomes porous, and things that should remain hidden are suddenly free to roam. There is a reason why so many stories of horror and transformation begin at midnight. It is the hour when the self is most vulnerable, when the mind is unguarded, when the monsters we keep at bay during the day come knocking. Midnight is the time of confessions and betrayals, of secret meetings and desperate acts. It is the hour when the past returns, when regrets and fears rise up from the depths, demanding to be faced. But midnight is not only a time of fear. It is also a time of possibility. In folklore, it is the hour when curses can be broken, when the lost can be found, when the dead can speak. It is a moment of transformation, when the world is remade in darkness and silence. For some, midnight is a time of hope, a chance to start again, to leave behind what no longer serves, to step into the unknown. Still, for most of us, midnight is a threshold we cross with caution. We sense, even if we cannot explain, that something is different on the other side. The rules are not the same. The shadows are deeper, the silence heavier, the air charged with possibility and threat. It is a time when the rational mind falters and the old fears return. Tonight, as we cross this threshold together, remember, midnight is not just a moment in time. It is a place, a state of being, a door that opens onto the unknown. And once you step through, there is no telling what you might find waiting in the dark. The Royal Infirmary of Edinburgh, 1785. The city outside is a labyrinth of cobblestone alleys and flickering lanterns. But within these hospital walls, the world is reduced to a single suffocating room. The air is thick with the scent of sweat, blood, and lie. Shadows crawl across the stone floor, cast by the wavering light of a single oil lamp. In the center of the room, a woman lies on a narrow iron bed, her body racked with pain, her knuckles white as she clings to the rails. Her name is lost to history, but her agony is not. Childbirth in the 18th century is a trial by ordeal. There are no anesthetics, no antiseptics, no assurances. The midwives and nurses who surround her are grim-faced, their hands stained and trembling. They have seen too many women die on these beds, some from blood loss, some from infection, some from the simple, brutal fact that a child's head can be too large for a mother's body. The woman's screams echo down the corridor, mingling with the distant moans of other patients, forming a chorus of suffering that never truly ends. Outside, the city is alive with secrets. The Enlightenment is in full bloom, and Edinburgh is a place of great minds and greater ambitions. But inside the infirmary, progress is measured in inches, in the slow, uncertain march from darkness to light. The doctors here are men of science, but their tools are crude, their knowledge incomplete. They are haunted by the limits of their own understanding. The woman's labor drags on hour after hour. The midwives exchange worried glances. The child is stuck, its skull wedged tight in the birth canal. The mother's face is ashen, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She is slipping away, and with her, the fragile hope of new life. The nurses whisper prayers under their breath, but their eyes are fixed on the door, waiting for the only man who might save her. At last, he arrives. Dr. John Atkin, a man whose reputation is both revered and feared. He is tall, with a shock of gray hair and eyes that miss nothing. He moves through the room with the calm authority of someone who has seen death and refused to yield. The staff part for him as if he were a priest entering a sanctuary. He kneels beside the bed, his voice low and steady, promising the woman that her pain will soon be over, that she and her child will survive. But there is something in his tone, a note of cold calculation, a hint of the experimenter at work. He speaks of a new instrument, a marvel of his own design, a tool that will change everything. The woman, delirious with pain, nods her consent, clinging to the hope that this stranger can deliver her from the jaws of death. Dr. Atkin leaves the room and returns moments later, cradling a device wrapped in cloth. When he unveils it, the nurses recoil. It is unlike anything they have seen. A length of chain, studded with sharp, gleaming teeth, looped around a pair of wooden handles. It looks more like a weapon than a medical instrument. The woman's eyes widen in terror, but she is too weak to resist as the nurses hold her down. The procedure begins. Dr. Atkin works with grim precision, guiding the chain into place, sawing through flesh and bone with a methodical rhythm. The woman's screams rise to a fever pitch, then falter, then fade. The room is filled with the wet, grinding sound of metal on bone, a sound that will haunt the nurses for the rest of their lives. Blood pools on the floor, soaking into the straw. The air is electric with fear and awe. And then, suddenly, it is over. The child is born, slick and wailing, alive against all odds. The mother, pale and trembling, is still breathing. Dr. Atkins stands back, his hands stained red, his face unreadable. The nurses stare at the instrument in his hands, unable to look away. They know they have witnessed something new, something monstrous and miraculous. The procedure is called a symphysiotomy. It is a desperate measure, reserved for the most hopeless cases. By severing the joint at the front of the pelvis, the birth canal is widened just enough to allow the child to pass. It is a brutal solution, but in this moment, it is the only one. Dr. Atkins' invention, a hand-cranked chainsaw, makes the operation faster, more precise, less likely to end in death. It is a triumph of ingenuity, a testament to the relentless drive of progress. But as the days pass, the nurses whisper about what they have seen. They speak of the instrument in hushed tones, calling it the devil's saw. Some say it is cursed, that it brings death as often as it brings life. Others marvel at its effectiveness, wondering what other miracles and horrors might be possible with such a tool. The chainsaw, born in the blood and agony of a mother's struggle, will go on to change the world in ways no one in that room could have imagined. It will leave the hospital behind, finding new purpose in the hands of men who fell trees and carve paths through forests. Its teeth will bite into wood and bone alike, a symbol of both salvation and destruction. In the end, the woman survives. Her child grows strong, but the memory of that night lingers in the walls of the infirmary, a reminder that every advance comes at a cost, that every miracle is paid for in blood. The chainsaw, that instrument of mercy and terror, is the surgeon's secret, a legacy forged at the midnight threshold, where life and death are separated by the thinnest of blades. Progress is a double-edged blade. The very tools we create to save ourselves can, in the wrong hands or under the wrong circumstances, become instruments of horror. The chainsaw was born in a hospital, its first teeth gnawing through bone to deliver life from the jaws of death. Yet, as decades passed, it slipped from the surgeon's grip into the calloused hands of lumberjacks, and then into the nightmares of storytellers and filmmakers. What began as a promise of hope became a symbol of dread, a machine that hums with the memory of every life it has touched. For better or for worse, this is the paradox of invention. We celebrate our ingenuity, our ability to bend nature to our will, to conquer pain, to cheat death. But every advance casts a shadow. The same chemistry that gives us medicine can also brew poison. The same electricity that lights our homes can spark disaster. The same internet that connects us can isolate, deceive, and destroy. We are always walking a narrow path between salvation and catastrophe, never quite sure which side will land on God. It's easy to forget the origins of the objects we use every day. The scalpel, the elevator, the automobile, the phone in your pocket, each has a history, a lineage of trial and error, of accidents and intentions gone awry. Some of these stories are lost to time. Others are buried because they are too disturbing to remember. But if you look closely, you'll see the fingerprints of fear and necessity on everything we build. So I ask you, what modern tool do you think hides a dark origin? Is there something in your home, your workplace, your daily routine that carries a secret history? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Sometimes, the most ordinary things are the ones we should fear the most. As we move forward, keep this in mind. The line between progress and peril is always thinner than we think. And sometimes, The very things designed to protect us are the ones that open the door to our darkest nightmares. The next story begins not with a machine, but with the presence of a visitor in the night, waiting just beyond the midnight threshold. 1904. The city is a restless beast, its heart pounding with the clatter of streetcars and the distant wail of factory whistles. But in the small hours of the night, all that noise recedes, leaving only the hush of darkness and the slow, uneasy breathing of those who cannot sleep. Anna Gray is one of them. She lies in a narrow bed on the second floor of a modest boarding house, the kind of place where the wallpaper peels in faded strips and the floorboards creak with every step. The air is thick and unmoving, heavy with the scent of old linens and the faint, sour tongue of the minced pie she'd eaten for supper. Anna's stomach churns, restless, as if her body knows something her mind refuses to name. She tosses and turns, the sheets twisted around her legs, her thoughts circling in anxious loops. The clock on the mantel ticks past midnight. Anna sits up, her nightgown clinging to her skin, and crosses the room to the window. She unlatches it, pushing it open to let in the city's breath, a thin, cool draft that stirs the curtains and brushes her face. For a moment, she stands there, eyes closed, letting the air soothe her. The city below is quiet, the gas lamps casting long shadows across the empty street. She feels a little better, the nausea fading, a heaviness in her chest lifting just enough to let her hope for sleep. She returns to bed, pulling the covers up to her chin, and soon drifts into a shallow, uneasy slumber. But the peace does not last. Hours later, Anna wakes with a start, her heart pounding, her mouth dry. The room is silent, but something is wrong. She can't say what it is, only that the air feels different, charged, as if someone has just left or is about to arrive. She sits up, scanning the room. Everything is as it should be. The battered dresser, the cracked mirror, the open window letting in the faint glow of the street lamp. But then her eyes catch on something that shouldn't be there. Perched on the windowsill, half in shadow, is a man. He is motionless, his face pale and expressionless, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that makes her blood run cold. He does not blink. He does not move. He simply watches. Anna's mind reels. How did he get there? The window is 2 stories above the street. She tries to convince herself that she is dreaming, that this is some fevered vision conjured by her unsettled stomach and the lateness of the hour. But the man is real. She can see the rise and fall of his chest, the way his fingers curl around the edge of the sill. Panic surges through her. She wants to scream, to run, but her body will not obey. Instead, she stares back, locked in a silent standoff. The man's lips curl into a faint, mocking smile. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he leans backward and lets himself fall from the window. Anna gasps, her paralysis broken. She scrambles to the window, expecting to see a broken body sprawled on the cobblestones below. But the street is empty. There is no sign of the man, no blood, no movement. Nothing but the long shadow of a car parked beneath the street lamp. It is a hearse, black and gleaming, its windows dark as obsidian. Inside the hearse, someone sits behind the wheel. Anna's breath catches in her throat as the driver looks up, meeting her gaze. It is the same man, the same pale face, the same unblinking eyes. He raises a hand, beckoning her with a slow, curling finger. The gesture is both invitation and command, a silent summons that chills her to the bone. Anna stumbles back from the window, slamming it shut with trembling hands. She presses her back against the wall, her mind racing. Was it a dream? A hallucination? She tries to reason with herself, to find some rational explanation, but the fear is too real, too immediate. She waits, listening for footsteps on the stairs, for the creak of the floorboards outside her door. But the house is silent. the only sound her own ragged breathing. Minutes pass. Or is it hours? Time loses meaning in the grip of terror. At last, Anna forces herself to return to the window. The hearse is gone. The street is empty once more. She tells herself it was nothing a nightmare, a trick of the light, a story she will laugh about in the morning. But she does not sleep. She lies awake, eyes wide, watching the shadows crawl across the ceiling until dawn finally breaks. The next day, Anna tries to shake off the memory. She dresses, gathers her things, and leaves the boarding house, determined to lose herself in the bustle of the city. Chicago is alive with noise and color. The new department store on State Street, a marvel of glass and steel in endless possibility. Anna spends hours wandering its aisles, letting the crowds and the bright lights wash away the residue of the night. By afternoon, she is tired but lighter, the events of the previous night receding into the background of her mind. She makes her way to the 4th floor, arms full of packages, and waits for the elevator. The doors slide open, revealing a car packed with shoppers. Anna hesitates, waving them on, content to wait for the next one. But the doors do not close. Instead, a voice calls out from inside sharp, impatient, unmistakably male. "Come on, miss. There's room for one more." Anna turns, searching for the source, and her heart stops. The elevator operator standing at the controls is the man from the window. The man from the hearse. He stares at her, his eyes cold and empty, his smile a thin slash of mockery. Anna recoils, shaking her head, backing away from the open doors. The other passengers look at her in confusion, but the operator's gaze never wavers. At last, he shrugs, and the doors slide shut. A moment later, a terrible sound echoes through the store, a metallic screech, a shuddering crash, the screams of dozens of voices raised in panic. Anna rushes to the stairwell, her heart pounding, and joins the crowd surging down to the ground floor. There, amid the chaos, she learns the truth. The elevator she refused to enter has plummeted 4 stories, its cables snapping, its passengers thrown into a tangle of broken bodies and shattered glass. 2 are dead. Many more are injured. Anna stands in the crowd, numb with shock. She tries to explain what she saw, what she knows, but the words catch in her throat. Who would believe her? Who could understand the terror of that midnight visitor? The man who watched her from the window, who beckoned her from the hearse, who waited for her in the elevator. She is alive, but she is not unscathed. The memory will follow her, a shadow at her back, a question she can never answer. Was it fate that saved her? Or something darker, something that wanted her to witness, to remember, to carry the story forward? Anna Gray would never know. But every night, as the clock ticks past midnight, she feels the weight of unseen eyes upon her and wonders if the man in the window is still waiting, somewhere just beyond the edge of sleep. There is something universal about the fear of a midnight visitor, a presence that slips through the cracks of our defenses when the world is at its most vulnerable. Across cultures and centuries, stories abound of figures who appear in the dead of night, the shadow at the foot of the bed, the face in the window, the silent watcher in the hallway. These intruders are rarely flesh and blood. They are the embodiment of our deepest anxieties, the things we sense but cannot see, the questions we dare not ask in daylight. In old European folklore, the night hag would sit on a sleeper's chest, stealing their breath and leaving them paralyzed with terror. In Japan, the Nopera-bi faceless ghosts wander the streets after midnight, their blank features reflecting the emptiness of the night itself. In the American South, tales of the boo hag warn children to keep their windows shut, lest something slip inside and ride them until dawn. Even in the modern world, the stories persist. The black-eyed children who knock on doors, the hat man who stands in the corner, the unblinking eyes that watch from the darkness, just beyond the reach of the porch light. What is it about the night that invites these visitors? Is it the silence, the isolation, the way our minds play tricks when we are alone with our thoughts? Or is there something more, something ancient and hungry, drawn to the places where fear and imagination meet? The midnight intruder is a shapeshifter, a mirror for our own uncertainties, a reminder that the boundaries between reality and nightmare are never as solid as we'd like to believe. So I ask you, have you ever seen something at night you couldn't explain? A shadow that moved when it shouldn't, a whisper in an empty room, a face at the window that vanished when you looked again? Share your story in the comments below. Sometimes the only way to keep the midnight visitor at bay is to speak its name, to bring it into the light, if only for a moment before the darkness returns. Bishopstoke, England, 2008. The village is quiet, its streets lined with hedges and the gentle sprawl of old brick homes. But on the edge of this sleepy place stands a relic of another era, a sprawling apartment complex, once alive with families and laughter, now reduced to a skeleton of boarded windows and graffiti-scrawled walls. The grass grows wild, weeds pushing through cracks in the pavement, and the only sound is the wind rattling loose shutters. In this forgotten place, one light still burns. One man remains. David File is 50 years old, and for 8 years, apartment 12B has been his world. He moved in when the place was still alive, when neighbors greeted each other in the hallways and children played in the courtyard. But time has a way of hollowing things out. One by one, the tenants left, some for better homes, some for new cities, some simply vanishing into the fog of memory. The company that owns the building, Atlantic Housing, decided it was time to tear it all down. They offered money, moving vans, promises of a fresh start. Everyone took the deal. Everyone except David. He could not leave. The apartment was cramped, cluttered with the detritus of a life lived in small spaces, stacks of old newspapers, a battered billiard table that took up half the living room, faded photographs taped to the walls. But it was his. The world outside had always felt too large, too uncertain. Here, in these four walls, he was safe. Here, he was someone. The eviction notice came as no surprise. David had been fighting it for years, ignoring the letters, refusing the phone calls, standing his ground as the world around him crumbled. But now, the end was official. The paper was taped to his door, the words cold and final. He ripped it down, crumpled it in his fist, and tossed it onto the growing pile of warnings and threats from Atlantic Housing. He sat at his kitchen table, staring at the peeling linoleum, the silence pressing in on him like a physical weight. Isolation does strange things to the mind. With every apartment that emptied, the building grew quieter, the nights longer. David began to hear things: a distant knocking, the echo of footsteps in empty halls, the low hum of voices that faded when he tried to listen. He told himself it was the wind, the pipes, the old bones of the building settling. But sometimes, in the small hours, he wondered if the place itself was alive, mourning the loss of its people, whispering to the last soul who refused to leave. His parents called, their voices tight with worry. They begged him to move, to let go, to come home. But David could not explain the pull this place had on him, the way it felt like the last piece of himself he could still control. He promised them he was fine, that he just needed more time. But time was running out. The day before the eviction, David made a decision. If they wanted him out, they would have to see what they had done. He would make a statement, something no one could ignore. He rummaged through his storage closet, pulling out a length of rope, an old electric timer, and a power tool he'd used for odd jobs around the building. He worked in silence, his hands steady, his mind strangely calm. He was building something, a final protest, a message carved in steel and blood. That night, the building was utterly still. David sat in his living room, the billiard table looming beside him, the trap he'd constructed humming quietly in the darkness. He thought about the years he'd spent here, the birthdays, the Christmases, the quiet evenings with a book and a cup of tea. He thought about the neighbors who had become ghosts, the laughter that had faded into silence. He wondered if anyone would remember him, or if he would simply vanish, another name on a list, another casualty of progress. In the morning, his parents arrived, frantic after a night of unanswered calls. They pounded on the door, their voices echoing down the empty hallway. Inside, they heard a strange, mechanical whirring a sound that grew louder with every passing second. They called the police, who arrived minutes later, their radios crackling in the stillness. The officers shouted David's name, but there was no answer. The whirring grew louder, more insistent, a metallic growl that seemed to come from the very heart of the building. With a final warning, one officer kicked in the door. What they saw inside would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The living room was a chaos of clutter, but all eyes were drawn to the billiard table, where David had rigged his final act. The power tool, a chainsaw, was strapped to the table, its teeth spinning, its engine roaring. David had positioned himself so that, when the timer triggered, the saw would swing down, ending his life in a single brutal instant. The officers froze, the horror of the scene sinking in. David's parents collapsed in grief, their cries echoing through the empty halls. The trap had worked exactly as he intended, a gruesome protest, a final refusal to be erased. The story made headlines across the country, the details too shocking to ignore. For a brief moment, David File was seeing, his pain and defiance laid bare for the world to witness. But the world moves on. Within weeks, the building was demolished, the rubble carted away, the land cleared for something new. The last traces of David's life were swept into the dust, his story fading into rumor and memory. Yet, for those who knew him, and for those who heard the story, the image lingers. A man alone in the ruins of his life, clinging to the only home he had ever known, driven to a final desperate act by the slow, relentless pressure of isolation. The last tenant, swallowed by the silence he could not escape. In the end, David's protest was not just against eviction, but against the world's indifference, the way it forgets those who fall behind, the way it erases the inconvenient, the lonely, the lost. His story is a warning, a plea, a ghostly echo in the empty halls of progress. And as the dust settles and the world moves on, the question remains, how many others are left behind, their stories untold, their voices lost in the darkness? 3 stories, 3 centuries, 3 lives forever, marked by the hour when the world stands still. At first glance, they seem unconnected, a mother in agony beneath the cold stone arches of an Edinburgh hospital, a young woman haunted by a faceless stranger in a Chicago boarding house, a solitary man unraveling in the ruins of his only home. But beneath the surface, something binds them together, a shadow that stretches across time and place. The Midnight Man. He is not a man in the ordinary sense. He is a presence, a force, a whisper in the dark. He is the surgeon's steady hand, promising salvation, but bringing terror. He is the face in the window, the beckoning finger, the voice that calls you into the elevator just before the cables snap. He is the silence that settles over an abandoned building, the loneliness that gnaws at the last tenant's mind until it breaks. He is the embodiment of the midnight threshold, a moment when fate and free will collide, when sanity teeters on the edge of madness. In each story, the Midnight Man appears at the point of greatest vulnerability. For the mother in 1785, he arrives in the guise of progress, a doctor with a new invention, a promise of life that comes wrapped in the thread of death. She has no choice but to trust him, to surrender her body to the unknown. Her fate is not her own. It is decided by the hands of others, by the relentless march of history, by the cold logic of necessity. Yet, in surviving, she claims a sliver of agency, a victory snatched from the jaws of terror. For Anna Gray, the Midnight Man is both a warning and a test. He comes to her in the night, shattering the fragile boundary between dream and reality. He offers her a choice: to step into the elevator, to follow him into the unknown, or to turn away. Her decision saves her life, but it also marks her, leaving her forever haunted by the question of what might have been. Was it fate that intervened, or did she exercise her own free will in the face of the uncanny? The answer is as elusive as the man himself. David Files' encounter is the most tragic. The Midnight Man is not a visitor from outside, but a force that rises from within, the slow, suffocating pressure of isolation, the madness that grows in silence. David's final act is both a protest and a surrender, a desperate attempt to assert control in a world that has stripped him of everything. In the end, he becomes his own midnight visitor, the architect of his own undoing. His story blurs the line between victim and perpetrator, between sanity and madness, between fate and choice. The Midnight Man is a shapeshifter, a reflection of our deepest fears and desires. He is the voice that whispers in the dark, the hand that pushes us to the brink, the shadow that waits just beyond the edge of reason. He is the force that tests the boundaries of what we can endure, the presence that asks, when the clock strikes 12, who are you really? Are you the survivor, the witness, the last soul standing? Or are you the one who opens the door, who steps into the darkness, who becomes the story others will tell? In the end, the Midnight Man is not just a figure in a tale. He is the thread that runs through all our lives, the reminder that at the edge of midnight, anything is possible. Fate and free will, sanity and madness, hope and despair, they all meet at the threshold, where the world is remade in shadow and silence. And as long as there are those who linger at the edge, who listen for footsteps in the dark, the Midnight Man will be waiting, ready to cross the line between story and reality, between the past and the present, between what is and what might be. Midnight is more than a moment on the clock. It is a state of mind, a place where the boundaries between what we know and what we fear dissolve. It is the hour when the world's masks slip, when the ordinary becomes uncanny, and when the questions we avoid in daylight come knocking at the door. Why do we fear the dark? Why does the unknown hold such power over us, even in an age of science and reason? Perhaps it is because, deep down, we understand that there are limits to what we can control, and that some doors, once opened, can never be closed. Fear is a teacher, a warning, a survival instinct honed over millennia. It keeps us from wandering too far into the woods, from trusting every stranger, from ignoring the creak on the stairs at midnight. But fear is also a mirror, reflecting the things we carry inside: our regrets, our secrets, our longing for meaning in a world that so often feels indifferent. The stories we've shared tonight are not just about monsters or ghosts or tragic endings. They are about the human need to make sense of the darkness, to find patterns in chaos, to believe that even in our most vulnerable moments, we are not alone. The midnight hour is a threshold, a test. It asks us who we are when no one is watching, when the world is silent and the shadows are deep. Would you open the window or keep it shut? Would you trust the surgeon's promise or run from the unknown? Would you fight to hold on to what you love, even as the world moves on without you? These are not just questions for the characters in our stories. They are questions for all of us. So I ask you, what would you do if the Midnight Man came for you? Would you face him, bargain with him, try to outwit him, or simply hide and hope he passes by? Have you ever stood at the edge of midnight, feeling the weight of something unseen pressing in? Have you ever made a choice in the dark that changed the course of your life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us your stories of fear, of courage, of the moments when you stood at the threshold and decided whether to step forward or retreat. Debate with each other, challenge each other, comfort each other. The midnight hour belongs to all of us, and the only way to keep its shadows at bay is to bring them into the light. In the end, what lurks at midnight is not just the unknown, but ourselves, our hopes, our fears, our capacity for both darkness and light. The Midnight Man is real, in the sense that he is the sum of all the things we cannot explain, all the mysteries we carry with us. And as long as we keep asking questions, as long as we keep telling stories, we will never truly be alone in the dark. Thank you for joining me tonight as we cross the midnight threshold together. If you made it this far, you're braver than most, and perhaps a little more curious about what really waits in the dark. These stories linger, not just because they're strange or unsettling, but because they remind us that the unknown is never as far away as we'd like to believe. Midnight is always just a heartbeat away, and sometimes the things we fear most are the ones that find us when we least expect it. If you found yourself holding your breath, questioning what's real, remembering your own brush with the uncanny, I invite you to become part of this community. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and join the conversation below. Share your thoughts, your theories, your midnight stories, because the more we talk about what haunts us, the less power it has to keep us awake at night. And if you think you're safe after midnight, think again. The next story I have for you will take us even deeper into the shadows, to a place where the line between reality and nightmare is razor thin. You won't want to miss it. The next tale may be closer to home than you think. Until then, keep your doors locked, your lights low, and your mind open. The midnight hour is never truly over, and the Midnight Man is always waiting for someone new to cross his path. Good night, and I'll see you on the other side.